They ruled with iron fists and cults of personality, reshaping entire nations to fit their vision. For years, sometimes decades, these men seemed invincible. They outlawed opposition, controlled the press, built secret police forces, and silenced critics with prisons, bullets, or worse. And yet, none of them could escape what finally came for them: death. Not one of them died peacefully in bed, surrounded by loved ones. Some fled, some begged, some stayed until the walls caved in. But every one of them met an ending that said just as much about their rule as it did about the man behind it. This is how history's most powerful and feared dictators died. Not with parades, not with tributes, but with bullets, betrayal, and sometimes total humiliation. Their final hours were often chaotic, rushed, or even absurd. And through each one, we see how absolute power may protect a man for a time, but never forever. Let's start with the dictator who died dangling from a gas station roof. Benito Mussolini, Italy's fascist leader, built an empire on slogans, salutes, and spectacle. But in the end, it all collapsed in dust and gunfire. After his Grand Council turned against him in 1943, Mussolini was arrested and held under guard. It could have ended there, but Adolf Hitler sent a commando unit to snatch him from his mountain prison in one of the war's most daring rescues. Backed by German guns, Mussolini was installed as the puppet ruler of the so-called Salo Republic in northern Italy. But it was a dead man's job. By 1945, the Allies and Italian partisans were closing in. Trying to escape, Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci, disguised themselves among fleeing Germans. But near Lac Como, partisan fighters recognized him. He was ordered held for trial, but local commanders had other plans. At dawn on April 28th, both were executed. Their bodies were trucked to Milan, dumped in the same square where fascists had once hanged dissenters, and strung up by the heels for the world to see. Mussolini's final chapter wasn't just an execution, it was a reckoning. Nicolae Ceaușescu. Ceaușescu ruled Romania with a blend of paranoia and pageantry. His regime crushed dissent while building megalomaniac palaces. But in December 1989, protests spread, fueled by police violence. During a carefully staged rally in Bucharest, thousands began booing him live on television. Ceaușescu froze. The camera cut. It was over. He fled with his wife by helicopter, but the military had turned. They were captured, tried by a hasty military tribunal, and sentenced to death. The entire process took under 2 hours. On Christmas Day 1989, both were shot in a freezing courtyard by a firing squad. Their execution was filmed and broadcast across the world. Ceaușescu, who once built his own cult of personality, died as fast as his empire fell, brutally and on camera. Japan's wartime prime minister stood behind the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the brutal campaigns in Asia. When the war ended, the Allies came for him. Soldiers surrounded his home in September 1945. Tojo, unwilling to be taken alive, pulled out a pistol and shot himself. But he missed his heart. Bleeding and conscious, he looked up at a journalist and said, "I am sorry it takes me so long to die." US doctors saved his life. He was tried at the Tokyo trials and sentenced to death. On December 23, 1948, he was hanged. His final words asked that no revenge fall on the Japanese people. But the damage was done. His war left scars across Asia that still haven't fully healed. Kim Jong-il. The dear leader of North Korea was rarely seen in public, but everywhere in propaganda. He ruled with secrecy and superstition. In 2008, he vanished from the public eye, sparking rumors of a stroke or death. State TV denied it, airing videos of him inspecting factories, always filmed from the same angle with odd pauses and smiles. People whispered about body doubles. Then in December 2011, the government confirmed his death, a heart attack while on a train, or so they said. The announcement was wrapped in myth. Sacred mountains wept, the skies glowed red, and birds circled in silence. His son Kim Jong-un took over almost instantly. In death, Kim Jong-il was made eternal by the regime, but outside, few mourned. Joseph Stalin. Stalin ruled the Soviet Union with fear. By the 1950s, he trusted almost no one. Even his doctors were purged. On March 1, 1953, he collapsed alone at his dacha. His guards, terrified of disturbing him, waited hours before calling for help. By then, it was too late. He lay unconscious for days, occasionally gurgling or twitching. Some officials claim he opened his eyes once and raised his arm in anger. Others say he simply gasped. On March 5th, he died from a cerebral hemorrhage. Millions lined up to view his body. Dozens died in the crush. But whispers began. Had his top men let him die? Beria, his feared security chief, was especially suspect. Pol Pot. Pol Pot killed nearly 2 million Cambodians in just 4 years. By the late 90s, he was hiding in the jungle, his revolution in ruins. In 1997, after executing a rival's son, even his inner circle turned against him. He was arrested by his own Khmer Rouge comrades and put under house arrest. Less than a year later, as international calls for his trial grew louder, Pol Pot was found dead. Officially, it was a heart attack, but some suspected poison or suicide. One journalist who met him days earlier described him as tired, paranoid, and eerily calm. Whatever the truth, he escaped justice, but not history. Saddam Hussein. When U.S. troops invaded Iraq in 2003, Saddam vanished. He resurfaced months later in a dirt-covered hideout near his hometown of Tikrit. He surrendered quietly, then declared, "I am the president of Iraq." His trial was long and chaotic. He was charged with crimes against humanity and sentenced to death. On December 30th, 2006, he was hanged. Cell phone footage of the execution leaked, showing guards taunting him. He went to the gallows defiantly, but his fall was complete. The once proud dictator who had filled palaces with gold died in a dark room on a rope. Franco held Spain in his grip for nearly 40 years, but even dictators grow old. In 1975, after months of illness, he finally died at 82. His funeral was solemn and massive. His chosen successor, King Juan Carlos, led Spain into democracy. But Franco's story wasn't over. In 2019, Spain's government removed his body from the Valley of the Fallen, a grand mausoleum he'd built. Protesters cheered and jeered. His family fought the move. But in the end, Franco was buried in a quiet cemetery, far from the monument he had claimed for himself. Tito. Tito was a different kind of dictator. He ruled Yugoslavia with charisma and control, keeping peace between ethnic groups and balancing East and West. In his final years, he battled illness. His leg was infected, but he delayed treatment too long. Amputation came too late. On May 4th, 1980, he died at 87. The world took notice. His funeral drew more heads of state than any before it. For Yugoslavs, it felt like the loss of a father. But without him, the country soon began to crack. Within a decade, it broke apart in violent war. Augusto Pinochet. Chile's former general lived long after his rule ended. In his 90s, under house arrest for torture and murder, he was still defiant. In 2006, he suffered a heart attack. He was moved to a hospital, sparking outrage. Some still worshipped him. Others remembered the disappeared. He died on December 10th, with his legacy bitterly contested. At his wake, a mourner spat on his coffin and was beaten by loyalists. Even in death, Pinochet divided his country. Mao Zedong. Mao was worshipped as a god, but behind the slogans, he was human and ill. A chain smoker with heart and lung disease, he suffered several strokes. In September 1976, he slipped into a coma and died a week later at 82. Though he requested cremation, his body was embalmed and displayed in Tiananmen Square, where crowds still shuffle past in silence. Mao's death left a power vacuum and a legacy of both revolution and ruin. Fidel Castro. Castro defied empires, outlived 10 U.S. presidents, and survived countless assassination plots. But time caught up with him. After surgery in 2006, he handed power to his brother Raul. He made rare public appearances, usually seated, often frail. On November 25, 2016, Fidel died quietly in Havana. He was 90. His ashes traveled by motorcade along the path of his 1959 revolution. Cubans lined the roads, some mourning, some not. Even in death, Fidel marched through history one last time. Adolf Hitler, April 1945. Berlin was burning. Soviet tanks closed in. Hitler, surrounded in his bunker, married Eva Braun in a brief ceremony. When he heard of Mussolini's public hanging, he made a decision. Capture was not an option. On April 30th, he took cyanide, then shot himself. Eva took poison too. Their bodies were burned just outside the bunker. When the Soviets arrived, they found the ashes. What was left of the most feared man in Europe had to be pieced together from dental records. Hitler's end was not glorious. It was hidden, frantic, and pitiful. The collapse of a nightmare from within its own walls. Power isolates, turning truth into whatever a dictator says. But it never lasts. Some died alone in luxury, others were hunted and executed, and a few passed quietly amid fractured governments. None escaped justice. History remembers them in ruins, toppled statues, and silent graves. Their cruelty outlived them. Absolute control feels eternal until it ends. These men ruled millions but were mortal and fallible. When the final curtain fell, no throne or crowd mattered. Dictators don't get happy endings. They get remembered, just as